Well, good evening, good morning, wherever you are. This is Alex at Reportify Media, and without further ado, I'm bringing Scott Ritter right on to the program because I know you guys are impatient. It's Monday. It's New York 10 o'clock time, 10:07, and as well 10 p.m. here in China. Scott, welcome to the program. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So I'm going to jump right into a few things. We heard Nikki Haley just at the end there mentioned Taiwan. Right at the end, she just kind of squeezed that in there, and that she had nothing but good intentions, but saying that if we back down or back away, there's going to be more war. Any thoughts on neocon Nikki's outlook?
Well, since the United States and China began normalized, I should say since the Chinese Communist Party in the United States began normalized diplomatic relations back in the early 1970s. The idea of one China has been out there. I mean, we have a one China policy, but it's never been real. It's always been fake. The United States has been playing word games with China in hopes that we could, over the course of time, cause the termination of the Chinese Communist Party's iron grip rule on China. We were hoping that market capitalism would engender the rise of a middle class that would not allow themselves to be ruled by an autocratic Communist Party dictatorship, things of that nature. So we played the word game of a one China policy, but what we really wanted was a one Taiwan policy, meaning that we wanted the collapse of communist China and a return of the Kuomintang or whatever ruling party it was from Taiwan back into China, so that it's one quote unquote democratic China. That's been our objective. And of course, history shows that the Communist Party has not gone away, that it has actually mastered the art of market capitalism in a way that doesn't require the end of political communism. The Chinese have not only created a middle class, but a huge middle class that's thriving. And the United States now is left with a one China policy that's been exposed as meaningless because we really always wanted, a China that looked like Taiwan. So we're not willing to give up Taiwan. And that's the problem. Our policy says one China, but the reality is if we can't have all of China being Taiwan, then we want two Chinas, Taiwan and China. And that's the trajectory that American policy is on right now. China has, during this entire time, spoken about the absolute requirement for the peaceful reunification of Taiwan and China. That only under certain extreme measures would China undertake the use of military force. And again, one is if Taiwan declares its independence straight out, and another one would be if the United States started to create a formal military alliance type structure. In which case, China would be compelled to take action, but that their priority has always been the peaceful reunification. Except now, China for the third straight year has passed a huge defense budget. I think the numbers, between 220. I mean, I think the official number is one thing. What people believe the real numbers are is another. But the bottom line is it's in the vicinity of $270 billion. And in talking about this and the policies behind this enlargement, for the first time, the Chinese premier has not used peaceful reunification when he speaks of China's policy towards Taiwan. So we're headed towards a war with Taiwan. I mean, it's still one that China hopes can be avoided. There it is. And hopes it can be avoided. China would prefer peaceful reunification, but it is being realistic. This is why you have the third straight year of massive defense spending where, now I will say this, that the Chinese have described their defense spending. One of the reasons behind it is to deter Taiwan from taking any precipitous action. So it means that war is not the inevitable outcome of this defense spending. But at the same time that China is worried about, Taiwan declaring independence, et cetera, we have the United States starting to, rethink decades-long approaches towards Taiwan, including towards China, including China as a nuclear power. China has rightfully begun to worry about America taking its nuclear posture, which gives a green light to nuclear preemption in non-nuclear arenas, and in fear that America, if it ever came to a war over Taiwan, that the United States might launch a preemptive strike to eliminate China's nuclear deterrence and therefore leave China vulnerable to American nuclear domination. and that would cause China to have to back down on Taiwan. So while China is being forceful about insisting that there be peaceful reunification, and forceful in making it known that if Taiwan or the United States chooses a different route, China will be ready to act upon the violent reunification. China will also is looking at restructuring, expanding its strategic nuclear deterrence, and it has to do this in order to create a capability that can survive an American first strike and still have sufficient nuclear counterstrike capability to bring serious harm to the United States, thereby deterring the United States from this action. So even though the budget is about Taiwan, it's about everything, because the United States is challenging China everywhere. We're challenging them in the South China Sea. We're challenging China, on a global scale, and China has to be prepared for this. And the United States has also shown itself willing to use proxies. India has just deployed 10,000 troops to the Chinese border in a very precipitous, provocative manner. India is doing this at the behest of the United States to create instability on China's frontiers, so that China is distracted. The Chinese resources are diverted, along multiple fronts, thereby weakening China everywhere. China, in passing its third consecutive massive defense spending, is saying, no, we'll be prepared for all matters, that we're not going to allow the United States to seize the strategic initiative from a policy standpoint by weakening us here, there, and everywhere, and therefore leaving Taiwan as this ripe fruit ready to be plucked. And so this is what's happening. So, Nikki Haley is, she's sort of right. There's going to be a war with Taiwan, but it's not because China wants this war. It's because the United States wants this war, because the United States has only one policy option, which is military. We don't have the ability to compel China to change its policy course through economic coercion, sanctions, etc. We don't have the diplomatic clout around the world to isolate China diplomatically. All we have is the threat of military power. But the reality is, this military power is non-existent. We're setting ourselves up for failure. And China's defense budget just guarantees the ultimate outcome, that the United States will, of course, lose any war with China over Taiwan.